All right, welcome back, everybody. Again, Jason Morse, Director of the Go School of Real Estate, alongside instructor Rob Grantmeyer. We're here again, breaking down a little bit more in detail the LLRC, as we've called that, the License, Law, and Rules comments. Again, this being a big part of the state content that you will be tested on, both in the course as well as beyond the course when you take the licensing exam through the PSI Testing Center. So again, license, law, and rules comments, that's what we're doing today. To give you guys a little bit of a review of what we covered in the previous video, we started out talking about who needs a license and who doesn't. You will undoubtedly be tested on some scenarios of actions or activities that either require a license or don't. So again, being able to identify those activities that require a North Carolina broker's license and activities that don't, along with who doesn't need a license in certain scenarios, and again, who does. Going along with that, we also talked about unlicensed employees, such as assistants, perhaps. An unlicensed assistant that is hired on by a real estate firm. What is it that they can and cannot do? So we covered that. Then we moved into the license categories and statuses. And we emphasized that in North Carolina, we have one license. You guys are all in this class preparing to not only successfully complete the class, but also take the state licensing exam, and upon passing that exam, you will be issued one license. Again, it is a broker's license, as compared to in some states, you may hear it called a salesperson license, sales associate, broker associate, et cetera. Again, in North Carolina, know that we are a broker license state. Now, there are different categories or statuses, whatever how you want to use that word, but there are different statuses to your broker's license. And so we started getting into the first status, which is known as a provisional broker. That is essentially the status that you are initially in as a new licensee. Once you pass that exam and are issued your license, it will be issued to you on provisional broker status, as well as an inactive status. We touched briefly on how to take it from inactive to active, and that essentially is affiliating with a real estate firm that has a broker in charge, so that you are supervised for that period of time as a provisional broker. And we also touched on the dual affiliation rule associated with being a provisional broker. Can a PB dual affiliate or not? And so knowing when and when they cannot, what are the scenarios there? We again touched on inactive versus active. We're going to talk some more about that today. And then we also touched on post-licensing requirements. That is taking that provisional broker status, removing the provisional status, and becoming a full broker. What do I have to do to do that? And that involves taking the post-licensing education requirements, understanding that, again, that consists of 3 30-hour courses that must be completed within 18 months of your license being issued. So that is a small recap of what we did last video. If you missed that video, please go back and check out video number 1 in the series on LLRC. What we've got next is we're going to continue to talk about the broker statuses, including broker status. And we're moving away from provisional broker. Now we're in full broker. So broker status and exactly what that entails. Then we'll move into the next status, which is broker in charge, a BIC status. And kind of sidebar on the BIC status conversation and talk about a major responsibility of BICs, one of many, and that is the trust accounts and handling of trust monies. We'll talk thoroughly through that. Then we'll touch a little bit on another status that's less commonly known, not tested very heavily necessarily, but something worth knowing about. It's called the limited non-resident commercial broker status. That's a mouthful, right? Limited non-resident broker status, commercial broker status. So we'll touch on that. Then we're going to get into the licensing of business entities and talk about firm licensing. We'll touch a little bit on some important dates that you'll need to know. There's several throughout the entire class, but when it comes to your license and status of your license, you'll want to know these dates that we'll touch on. Then we're going to finish up by talking a lot more about the active, the inactive, and then introduce to you the expired status, again, to round out our discussion on broker statuses or categories. And then we'll end today with an introduction to the Real Estate Commission. We know them as NCREC, or more specifically, North Carolina Real Estate Commission. So we've got a lot to cover today. Right, Rob? You ready to get started?
Yes, sir.
All right. So what first up on our screen here, again, we're going to get into broker status. So what do we need to know or understand about this particular status? We're no longer a provisional broker. We're now a broker. What does that mean?
That means we have officially dropped the provisional. No more provisional. You're going to get a new one of those pocket cards that we looked at last time, that instead of saying PB, it's going to say B. So you're now a broker. That's exciting. You have officially satisfied all your post-license education requirements, which is 90 hours, all done. It's in the rear view. However, there is a little bit of a misconception with regards to what you can and cannot do as a broker, right? Some people think, in fact, just about every pre-licensing class, including someone who's watching this video probably out there by the time it's on whatever platform it's on, hopefully maybe multiple platforms, who knows. Somebody's watching this thinking, well, I'm going to pass my PSI real estate exam. I'm going to do those 90 hours in 6 weeks, and I'm going to go solo, never again affiliate with a firm. I'm going to be Joe Smith, realtor, out there on my own. And I'm here to tell you, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You need a little bit more experience before the North Carolina Real Estate Commission is going to allow you to work 100% independently, in a full capacity independently. So once you are a broker, what most brokers will do, it's still affiliate with a firm like Better Homes and Garden, Paracle Realty, or Coldwell Banker, Seacoast Advantage, or whomever. And that's fine. You can be non-provisional, full broker, affiliated with a broker in charge like Jason, or a broker in charge like myself, and we can continue to supervise you as a real estate broker. You could, however, also, the Real Estate Commission does allow you to become a sole proprietor, meaning that you are not affiliated with a firm once you are a full broker. Now, the thing is, as you see there in bright red, fire engine red, no advertising as a non-BIC sole proprietor. And that's fairly significant because, for example, if you're a non-BIC sole proprietor, that means you've done your 90 hours to remove your provisional and you've left your firm, you're now solo, out there on your own. What limitations exist? And the biggest one is going to be no advertising. And that includes handing out business cards, posting your services on Facebook, because essentially the Real Estate Commission wants you to either be still affiliated with a firm, which means there's some supervisory role going on, or to go ahead and become a broker in charge, which we'll talk about in a sec what that means. And so while you are a non-BIC sole proprietor, basically a broker sole proprietor, you may not advertise your services as a broker, and you may not have a trust account, which is a trust account is essentially warehousing monies that belong to other people, such as earnest money deposits or security deposits or rent collection, that type of thing. And so I always tell people, don't fall in love with the idea of being completely on your own 2 months, 3 months, even 1 year after you pass your exam, because in order to be truly on your own, as I am now, I'm what's called a broker in charge sole proprietor. I've got enough experience that the Real Estate Commission allows me to work totally independent. But as a broker sole proprietor, you cannot advertise, you cannot have a trust account, you cannot hire staff, etc. So broker's a great next step. You've dropped the provisional, but chances are, unless you're planning to exclusively do referrals as a broker sole proprietor, or let's say if you have a family member or a close friend who wants to use you as a buyer's agent only, where you don't have to advertise then you could be that's possible as a broker sole proprietor, but I can't see a listing agent being a broker sole proprietor because you can't advertise. So that's kind of an important thing to note. No advertising. I always tell people you can advertise in one of two capacities: either advertise as an affiliate of a firm. You can be an affiliate of a firm your whole career. Hopefully you will. Hopefully you'll join Better Homes and Garden, Paracle Realty, or another similar great firm and stay there forever. Or if you want to advertise as a sole proprietor, you need to elevate yourself to a broker in charge.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a huge point here as far as some misconceptions that folks have as they're taking the class. Again, we mentioned this in video number 1 of this series, how, a lot of folks are a little stunned when they realize, oh, wait, I'm not going to be able to open up Morris Realty as soon as I get my hot off the press license from the Real Estate Commission. And, no, the answer is no. And you wouldn't want to necessarily, because like we said also previously, is there's so much more to learn even after you finish the course, even after you finish the post-licensing courses. There's so much to learn, and you do that alongside a brokerage, and especially a broker in charge who is supervising you. And I don't know about you, Rob, but I don't know of any new businesses that survive without advertising. So you have to, again, consider that you will not be able to advertise as one of the many restrictions if you are not affiliating with a firm, even beyond your post-licensing coursework for a period of time. We're going to talk more about the responsibilities of a broker in charge, one of which is monitoring all of the advertising that is going on within the firm and from the firm's agents. And so if you have no BIC and you yourself are not a BIC, you can again imply that from that you cannot advertise. So that's tough. You gotta realize you're gonna have to be affiliated with a firm and really continue to put your time in and gain some additional experience.
And I always think it's neat when I see some really successful real estate agents who have been affiliated with a firm for years upon years, and they're smart. They know that they've got a formula that works for them. They appreciate the coaching. They appreciate the accountability. They appreciate the networking that comes through it. And so there's something to be said for, even as a successful broker, even as someone who is broker in charge eligible and highly successful, there's many great agents who choose, in fact, I'd say the majority choose to stay affiliated with some type of firm, some type of broker in charge for the coaching, for the accountability. Just like all the greats in industry and sports and other stuff, they tend to seek their own independent coaches, and they know that having someone that will hold them accountable and someone who challenges them is a very important thing for their career.
Absolutely.
All right, cool. So just to wrap up broker status, you could stay a broker your whole career, right? You have to transition from provisional broker to broker within those first 18 months, and you may just stay broker forever, right? And that's perfectly fine. There are plenty of great agents who never elect to become a broker in charge. They're not necessarily cut out for or lack the desire to be in management, or they don't want to work independently, and so they can stay a broker forever, and that's great. But while they are a broker, they would not be able to, or I should say would have to, declare themselves as a broker in charge if they're individual, right? If you're a broker affiliated with a firm, that's one thing. But if you're a broker who leaves the firm and goes independent, here's the things, total list of things you may not do. You may not hire staff, licensed or not. You may not hold trust funds, which we touched on. And the big one, which we touched on, is may not promote brokerage services, including oral solicitation. You're not even supposed to chat people up at Walmart, right? And be like, oh, pardon me, I overheard you talking about you need to sell your house. Well, guess what? I'd be glad to help you. So if you're planning to have that conversation with people in line at Walmart, you need to either be affiliated with a firm or be a broker in charge if you're promoting your services. All right. And as of July, by the way, new hot off the press rule here, we said that, well, we probably said it in the last video. In fact, I know we did. Provisional brokers have always had to be compensated by their broker in charge. That's been the case for as long as we've had provisional brokers, which if you're keeping track, it's about 18 years. Now then, as of July 2021, which was the beginning of the fiscal year for the North Carolina this fiscal year for the North Carolina Real Estate Commission, all affiliated brokers. So it's not just the provisionals, it's now full brokers who are affiliated with a firm must be compensated by their broker in charge. I said when I saw this rule is a little bit redundant. It's now law, which is great, but it was kind of when you join a firm as a broker, you will sign an agreement, an independent contractor brokerage agreement to join that firm. And all the firms I've ever been affiliated with, that's usually one of the criteria that they hold you to is, listen, we want all monies to flow through us, right? Not all firms necessarily practice it that way, but this rule has kind of been unofficial for a while, where most firms will say, all right, listen, we want your commissions to flow through us. That's just the way we do business. But it's no longer up to the firm to decide as of July 2021, if you are affiliated, provisional, full broker, BIC eligible, whatever. If you're affiliated, then you must be compensated by your BIC. You cannot accept a referral fee on the side or a commission on the side.
Yeah, so I know a closing attorney buddy of mine is very happy about this rule. Can you imagine why? Because he has had brokers for many years now call him and say, hey, pay me, write the check out to me. And sometimes the attorney is reluctant to do that because, again, you are affiliated with a firm. And so, now that this has become official rule, the attorneys are happy about that. But again, the stipulation here, though, is if you're affiliated, if you're a full broker affiliated with a firm. So let's say, Rob, that you're not affiliated with a firm, right? You're an independent sole proprietor who's a BIC.
And a brick, yes.
And a BRIC. Right? You're a sole proprietor of BIC, right?
Yes, sir.
I am also a BIC status, but I am affiliated with a firm. So even in my case, because of my affiliation with the firm, I have to be paid through my firm and my BIC, because I am not the BIC of my own firm, even though I have a BIC status, or more specifically, a BIC eligible status right now. Whereas you, again, you are the BIC and you are essentially the firm operating independently, right? So if you and I did a referral agreement, I could actually pay you directly. But if you were sending me a referral fee, you would have to send it to my firm. Is that essentially where this rule is also kind of describing?
That's an excellent explanation. You got it. And just like the same rule that you said for attorneys, the same relief applies to broker in charge, because I remember people writing these checks saying, well, Jolene wants us to pay her directly, but what does her firm say? Because if her firm has a policy and Jolene had agreed to that policy and we paid Jolene directly, well, now we've just ticked off that firm and we want them to pay us when it's time for one of our brokers to get paid. So it's just probably better business for everybody to just say across the board, if you're affiliated, go ahead and pay it through the firm. The firm doesn't legally have to take any certain percentage of that referral fee or that commission check, but it does need to be paid through the firm.
Right, exactly. All right. So next up, we're going to talk about that broker in charge status, the next status in our list. Again, we've gone from provisional broker to full broker. And like you said, ain't nothing wrong with staying in that full broker status for your entire career. We know people that do that. In fact, I would recommend it after my experience as a BIC. More on that later. I'll digress for now. But then you can, again, move into broker in charge status. So let's talk a little bit about what that means and how do we get there?
Yeah, and just real quick on the broker thing, it was funny. Some people I know were trying to hire a BIC in my town not that long ago, about 6 months ago. And they were like, who do you know? And I thought, I know so many people that would be great for that job. And then as I started thinking about it, the people who I know that would be great don't want it because they're very successful brokers
Right.
who are working with sellers and working with buyers. And they think, I got a good thing going here, buddy. I don't really want to trade that in for a management role. And then the people I know who are not really successful brokers, I'm thinking, I don't know that I'd recommend them for the management role, right? And so it's kind of a unique type person
It's
that
the
can
toughest
do both.
position to fill in any firm, right? It is the toughest position.
It
Good
is.
instructors the same way, right? Good
Right.
instructor.
That's
Hard.
true. That's true. Some people really enjoy doing this. And I have friends that this would be misery to them. They'd much rather be out there showing property, highly extroverted people that would really they need to be around a lot of people to keep their energy up. And then there's instructors and BICs who don't mind being kind of behind the scenes and the team builder and putting the fires out and solving the problems. But there are a lot of really good salespeople who don't necessarily seek the broker in charge position. And so it's kind of a good thing to point out to people. It's like, well, not everybody becomes a broker in charge. The majority would stay broker. And if you're really good at working with buyers and sellers, I mean, that's the lifeblood of this industry. Keep doing it because it makes your broker in charge successful and happy and helps everybody. So, but to become a BIC, obviously we got to get those 90 hours out of the way. So check that box first. 90 hours out of the way. You're not provisional. You need to be on active for at least 2 years full-time actual brokerage experience, right? And it's to be a little bit more specific than what's written here. It's 2 out of the last 5. So you could have done 1 year full-time brokerage experience, taken a full-time job with IBM for 2 years, come back, had 1 year full-time brokerage experience. That's fine. That can count as the 2 years. Another question comes up a lot. Does my provisional broker time count? And it does, as long as it's full-time actual brokerage experience. We don't mean you just have an active license. We're saying you're full-time, actively engaged in the real estate industry for 2 out of the last 5 years.
Right. Yeah.
And then there's kind of an either or. Then you kind of come to as the great Yogi Berra would say, when you come to the fork in the road, take it. And so you come to a fork in the road. There's 2 ways you can go about becoming a broker in charge. Once you're non-provisional, once you got 2 years full-time actual experience out of the last 5, you can either do what I did, because I didn't know any better. I thought, well, I want to be a broker in charge. What do I got to do? Do I got to figure out how to jump out of an airplane or like wrestle an alligator or something like that? Beat someone in arm wrestling. I wasn't really sure. And so they're like, no, you just go take a 12-hour class. You go, and in my day, it was even easier. It's not easy necessarily now, but it was relatively easy about a decade ago when I did it, because we just went and sat through a 12-hour class, 8 hours one day, 4 hours the next, no test. It was pretty entertaining. Had 2 really good teachers, one from the Real Estate Commission, one who was a local Jacksonville, North Carolina BIC. And it was fantastic. Me and my friend Nancy took the class together. As soon as we were done with the class, we waited a couple days for the instructors to share our information with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Once that was done, Nancy and I, not the same form, but she submitted her form 2.25. I submitted my form 2.25. That's called the BIC declaration form, broker in charge declaration form. And so we both, because we didn't know any better, we took the class first and then submitted the form. And so that's what we did in order to make ourselves a broker in charge. But as we'll see in a sec, you don't necessarily have to do that in that exact order. You could potentially submit the form and then circle back and take the class within 120 days. Which one was your experience, Jason? Did you class first or form first?
Yeah, well, I look at it as proactive or reactive. And in my case, like you, I was proactive. I wanted to understand how to become a BIC and take this course and get myself ready
Yeah.
should a BIC position come available. Now, there are some cases where firms will all of a sudden be without a BIC. And we'll talk later on in a future video. That can't happen. You have to have a BIC in charge. And so sometimes a quick staffing change has to take place. And if you are at least qualified, you've met these other criteria here on your screen to become a BIC, then you can go ahead and submit that declaration form that Rob spoke of and officially declare yourself as that BIC at that firm, and then take that corresponding course that's required, again, within 120 days. So it's either a matter of you're just, proactively, preparing yourself for being a BIC one day, or you're all of a sudden in a firm where the BIC is going away for whatever reason, and there needs to be another BIC in place. And so they look at you and they say, you're now the BIC. You qualify, right? Yeah, you've done this. You're not a provisional. You've been here at least 2 years. All right, we're going to go ahead and declare you as the BIC so that we have one on record, and then make sure that you complete the requirements as needed to make that even more official, essentially. But yeah, I was proactive, which is a good thing, because shortly thereafter, I was reactive. I immediately came a BIC after that. And it's kind of like, be careful what you ask for, because once they found out I went to get my broker in charge course done and filed the BIC eligibility paperwork, yeah, boy, then they start looking at you like, oh, well, now you can do this. Yeah, here are the keys.
Yeah, it's like what they call in the military the battlefield promotion. It's like
battlefield promotion. Yeah,
somebody stepped aside, and guess what? Congratulations, you're going to be our new BIC. Now, of course, somebody could always say, maybe not, but it's nice. Sometimes that's a good, and I bet you a lot of the great BICs out there, that's how it happened. They just have to be in the right place at the right time. And they're like, why don't you do it? And you're like, okay. I jokingly say sometimes it comes down to rock, paper, scissors. We're like, all right, it's me or Jason. One of us has got to do it. And so we'll rock, paper, scissors for it. And one of us ends up being the BIC of the company. So. Yeah.
And we're speaking as though this is just a terrible position. We're tongue in cheek here, but I hope the audience that we're that's listening to us, is getting some feel for what path they want to take. Like you were describing, there's some people that are great for the the day-to-day field work of our job, and then there's some people that are even better behind the scenes, such as in a broker in charge role. So I don't want us to sound too negative on the position. It's certainly not, and it certainly has taken both you and I places, but yeah, we'll let the people decide which direction they want to go.
Right. Let the rainmakers make rain.
Yeah.
They're the picture and we're the frame, basically. You need both.
You need both
in this life. So
yeah.
Cool. Well,
let's talk about some of the responsibilities that we have as BICs here.
Yeah, and we could go on. And in fact, we do go on in post-licensing 303, we go on, and in the BIC course, we go on. And so one of the BIC's responsibilities, there's a portal. As a BIC, you'll be able to log into the Real Estate Commission website and see your portal. I always jokingly say I need to check to make sure no one's affiliated with me, because a great prank would be a full broker can actually submit the 2.08 form on their own with their BIC's permission once you're a full broker. And I was like, I mentioned that in post-licensing. I'm like, I hope I don't one day turn around and have like 8 affiliated people that I didn't know about. I'll be so mad. I'll be like,
it's a good thing you're checking. That's good.
It's a good thing you're checking, right? And I can go online, and if there's anyone affiliated with me, it'll say, oh, well, here's Jason Smith in Hendersonville, North Carolina. And one of the things I would look, if Jason actually was someone I wanted to have affiliated with me, is I could go in there around May, early June, maybe early May, and say, oh, Jason, I see you haven't done your CE yet. That's one of my responsibilities. Now, I'm not solely responsible for making sure brokers do their CE. It's really their responsibility, but it's my responsibility as a BIC that if Jason Smith does not do his CE, if he does not pay his renewal fee and he ends up inactive or expired, I need to put Jason Smith on the bench as the broker in charge I cannot allow Jason Smith in Hendersonville or wherever to carry on doing what we would call illegal brokerage, practicing brokerage with a expired or inactive license. So I do have some responsibility for my supervisees to make sure that they are active, that they are current, and that happens probably any large firm around July 1st, close to July 1st each year. They may have to reassign some clients to people who did not let their license go inactive. So that's one of our gigs there. And to also make sure that our transactional records are available upon request for review by commission auditors. I've seen that happen before, where the real estate commission showed up at a firm that I used to work for, and they showed up. I actually held the door for them, and they came walking in. They were dressed really nice. I was dressed nice that day. And they're like, "Hey, we're from the real estate commission. We're here to audit your transaction records." I was like, "I'm not with them, just so you know. I'm separate over here." We walked in together, but we're not together. But it worked out fine. The company had done a great job. The BIC of that office had done a great job of keeping their records up to date and accurate. And the real estate commission gave them a few tips, and that was it. They didn't have any issues. So
Good
show. I know, especially since I was the guy that held the door for him.
Yeah.
So sure, they would have been like, "Dang it, Rob, true or false?" Let's do a quick Q&A here, a little challenge. Let's see, true or false. A non-provisional broker, by the way, I apologize on behalf of Real Estate Test Nation, the way we oftentimes use non-provisional, because I know from personal experience, sometimes when you get to question 112 and you see non-provisional, you're tired enough that you skip the non and you actually read that as a provisional broker. So warning, be careful with that while you're testing. Is a non-provisional broker is essentially just a broker, right?
Yeah,
but it's important. It's important. The real estate commission does that on purpose. And I actually applaud that, because they want you to have a keen eye for detail, right? If someone's going to be helping me with a $500,000 real estate purchase, I would want them to be fairly detail oriented if they're advocating for me. So I kind of get it.
Yeah. Big responsibility. So
big responsibilities, big shoes to fill here. So a non-provisional broker working for Paracle Realty in Charlotte may receive a referral fee directly from their brother, who is an active broker in Wilmington, North Carolina. So audience, please take a few seconds and think about it.
So this reminds me of the scenario that we just talked about between you and I. If I sent you a referral, it's a little different than if you sent me a referral.
Precisely. And the cheese here, there's a little bit of cheese when they say a non-provisional broker, because you might say, well, yeah, you're non-provisional. You could get paid by anybody. Not so fast, my friend. That may have been the case once upon a time, but as of July 2021, this fiscal year, our New Year's Day for the Real Estate Commission, that is going to be false. If you are affiliated, as this person is, with Paracle Realty in Charlotte, then you must be compensated by your firm's broker in charge. Yes. Even though it's your brother. It's like, but I'm related to the guy, so what? Doesn't matter. If you're affiliated, got to be paid. Even though Jason's a broker in charge, I would have to pay that through his firm.
Well, indeed. Run it through the firm. All right, so we've talked about broker in charge responsible for ensuring that the agents that are under them have the CE done every year. We're going to keep talking about CE, I think, in the coming up. They're also responsible for the advertising. We mentioned that earlier on. And then we've got now trust money, but what was the other thing? Making sure that the records are up to date, of course. Yes.
Yep, transaction records.
So that when Rob walks in and holds the door open for the real estate commissioners who are coming in with their audit hats.
They probably waited in the car until I drove up. There he is. Hail him.
But so here's another duty of the broker in charge, a pretty big, important one. We're going to talk about trust accounts and trust money. We're going to spend some time on this. So let's get started with, again, trust accounts. Tell us about it.
All right. Trust money. It's a big deal, and it's I don't want to say it's becoming a smaller deal, but I think a lot of companies nowadays who exclusively work with buyers and sellers, they don't do any property management. The tendency nowadays seems to be to lean towards using a closing attorney's trust account rather than having your own. But there are still plenty of real estate firms out there, including about 100% of them who manage property for others, who do have trust accounts, aka escrow account. And so what it is it's a safe harbor bank account where you're warehousing monies that belong to other people. Money belonging to others received by a real estate broker who is acting as an agent in a real estate transaction. So we can call that trust money. We can call it escrow money. That's the process there.
So we're not talking about commissions or what I get paid, referral fees or anything like that, right? We're talking
Correct. Yeah, it's going to be monies that were basically the most, and there's some great examples at the bottom. The most common would be, let's say that Jason is making an offer to purchase a property in Wilmington, and that's listed by my firm, and he writes a check for $5,000 as his earnest money deposit, which those of you who've taken the class, which is all of you at this point, you know that the earnest money deposit will be a credit to the borrower at closing. It's a down payment, basically. But we're not just going to take that down payment and hand it right over to the seller, right? The seller's really never going to get that money directly. That deposit will be lumped in with the seller's proceeds at closing. So that earnest money deposit that Jason writes the check for, I would then take that if I'm the broker in charge with a trust account. I would then take that earnest money deposit and deposit it into our trust or escrow account and keep it there, safe harbor bank account, until closing or until just before closing. And there's a lot of work that goes into keeping up with a trust account. There's some things you could do wrong to get yourself in a little bit of hot water. And thus, that's why I think a little bit of a tendency nowadays is to use the attorney's trust account if you don't have to actually warehouse the money yourself. But that's probably the most prime example of trust money would be earnest money deposit, aka a down payment on the property.
Right. Or like you said, in the case of a property manager, the rents and the security deposits. Mm-hmm. Again, I can't just take that money from others and put it in my own account, even though I'm going to hold it safe and everything in my account. It's still what we call, what's the magic word they'll see on the test, the co-word?
Oh, the co-word, commingling. Don't be a commingler.
Don't be a commingler.
Yeah, bad news.
You got to have that separate trust account. You'll see a lot of commingling, mistakes, so to speak. But if we haven't mentioned it by now, I'm sure you'll hear it before you finish your class. The Real Estate Commission publishes a monthly real estate bulletin, which has some updates in it and some great articles. And at the end, they publish the folks who they have reprimanded or folks that have had their licenses revoked or anything in between. So it's kind of like the jail of the bulletin. Everybody kind of rushes back to the back of the bulletin to see if they know anybody in jail, so to speak. And and so what you see the majority of times, at least right now and in previous history, are people commingling when they shouldn't be commingling funds and deposits and monies. So definitely, when you see the word commingling on an exam, you'll know that that's a bad thing.
Bad thing. Yeah.
Real quick too, Rob, I'm noticing here on your presentation slide, you've got, under examples, not due diligence fees. These trust accounts, the required monies that go into trust accounts, do not include due diligence fees. Tell us why.
Yeah, great question. So I always try to emphasize fee versus deposit. Over there in purple, we've got the fee. Over there at the beginning, we have earnest money deposits, security deposits. And so a fee usually in our business is going to be paid directly to the other party. So for example, Jason wrote that $5,000 earnest money check, which is going to be a deposit, which is going to stay in escrow until closing. He may, especially in 2022, he may also pay a due diligence fee. Let's say he writes a second check as due diligence fee, which is also a down payment, but that's going to be paid directly to the seller, and that money will belong to the seller once we have a officially formed contract. But that's different. Due diligence fees do not go into the trust account. Option fees usually do not go into any type of trust account. Retainer fees is another example when we talk buyer agency. If you see the word fee, usually that's paid directly to the individual. There's always exceptions, but that's usually how it's going to play, where the due diligence fee, first time I wrote a due diligence fee was 2015. And I was like, it's a what? I didn't know. They've only been around since about 2012, I want to say. And so when I was doing a lot of general brokerage, we didn't have them. We only had earnest money. And as in a lot of states, you'll meet some out-of-state brokers who are, say, a due diligence. What is that? Well, in North Carolina, it's a fee paid directly to the seller. We'll get into that more in other chapters in the class. We'll go deep on the difference between deposits and fees, but it's important to understand just kind of briefly the difference right here.
Yeah, great distinction there. I like that distinction.
Yep. And then security deposits, also a deposit. Rents, we'll talk about that in a little more detail in a sec. And then HOA dues and assessments. There are property management companies who manage HOAs and have to collect monthly dues and occasional assessments for repairs, that type of thing. All of that stuff, all four down there are paid into the trust account.
All right, good examples. All right, so if we have to have a trust account, what are some of the features or standards that are required of a trust account?
Sure. So as we said, no commingling. There's bad commingling and there's far worse commingling. I've known people who did both. I knew someone, if you have too much of your own personal money in your trust account, that's bad commingling. Far worse is when you're using other people's money from your trust account to pay for your own stuff. That happens too sometimes. You can guess which one is far worse in the eyes of the real estate commission. And so it's got to be separate, right? This is a separate bank account. As we'll probably see in a sec, you're allowed to have up to $100 of your own money in that trust account, just to cover any overdraft fees, any bank fees. But that's it. You cannot have more than $100 of your money. And most definitely, you don't need to be using other people's deposits, other people's rent payments to pay your own bills, as one or two real estate agents in the distinguished history of North Carolina have been known to do from time to time. Not many, but it has happened. And that's why we have a real estate commission, so that those folks are not allowed to do business under those practices. So it's got to be separate, containing only money belonging to others, with that $100 exception. And then custodial is always an interesting phrase to me. I never really understood it in the early days. It's like custodial. I was like, is it custodian? What is it? I don't get it. And then it finally occurred to me. I said, well, you know how, like, if you're watching TMZ or something and they're like, such and such is in the custody of the Wake County Sheriff's Department this evening. Somebody misbehaved, real estate agent misbehaved. He or she's in the custody of the New Hanover County Sheriff's Department. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Because if you're in the custody of the sheriff department, you can't just go get in your car and drive home. They're saying, no, I'm sorry, you're spending the night. You're going to be here a little while. You're in the custody of the Department of Corrections or whatever. Well, this is kind of the same way. When you pay a deposit, like an earnest money deposit, it's in the custody of the trust account holder, which is usually the firm or the attorney. And so the person who paid that deposit can't just say, let me go click a button and get my money back, right? It is in the custody of the firm or the attorney, and they're not going to release that money until certain things have to happen. So only brokers or brokers designated employees, oftentimes an accountant or a controller or whatever, has access to it. So I mean, to be kind of think about it. If the person who paid the earnest money or the security deposit could just log in and transfer that money back to their own bank account, it'd be no point. It'd be a waste of time. So that's custodial. And then available on demand, funds may be withdrawn. And some people freak out when they see those two. They're like, don't those contradict each other? And I say, no, available on demand means that the firm or the attorney can withdraw them on demand, but the person who paid them cannot, right? If the person who paid the deposit wants their money back, well, we can probably make that happen, but there's certain things that have to happen first. But the trust account owner, whether it's the firm or the attorney, must be able to access the funds on demand.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll talk there. This will come into play when we talk more in other areas of the course about that earnest money deposit that you've mentioned a few times. And if there is a dispute between who gets that money, under the scenario of a breach of contract or cancellation of contract, that'll come in more and make more sense then. But great explanation of custodial. I've actually never even thought about it like that myself. So bravo.
Yeah. Helps to watch a lot of crime TV shows.
You and your TMZ.
It paid off. And so celebs always getting in trouble. And so, speaking of, that's why it's great to not be the person who manages that trust account, right? Because if you get into a salty dispute where the buyer and seller are fighting about it, and you say, I don't have it, you can go talk to the attorney. That attorney over there, I used to jokingly talk about Chris Mann, attorney at law, the great Chris Mann. I was like, kind of reminds me, he's got a little Michael Corleone in his game. And I'm like, yeah, go see the Godfather Jr. over there, and demand your money back, because they come into my office demanding it. I'm like, I think Chris could talk you out of that.
Let's see how that'll work for you.
Yeah, I think he'll settle you down, and you'll walk away feeling better about it. So where can I have this trust account, assuming that I have to have one? And as I said, again, if you're managing property belonging to others, you're going to have one. And so it's got to be in basically the short version is a bank or savings and loan institution, federally insured and lawfully doing business in North Carolina. So FDIC insured, Federal Depository IC insured, right? That's specific, by the way, because credit unions are in some ways federally insured, but not FDIC insured. And so you may not, it's a good sneaky test question that they tend to ask, can I have a trust account with a credit union? No, you may not. And so it needs to be with a bank or savings and loan institution who's FDIC insured, lawfully doing business in the best state in the union, North Carolina. They meaning the bank, must agree, or savings and loan must agree to make their records available for inspection without notice by the real estate commission. This is an easy thing to remember, because think about it. I can make my records say whatever I want them to say. I'm pretty creative like that. My brother once made his own report card when he was at UNCW. He literally fabricated his own report card. That's the type of family I come from, the gifts that we have. And so, and it worked too. They bought it for a while. And so, till the real report card showed up. And so I can make my records show whatever I want. But it's why it's critical that the real estate commission be able to audit my records and the bank's records. Because if my records show that I've got $200,000 in my trust account, but the bank records show I've got $120,000 in the trust account, I might be going to jail in the near future. So that's a good reason why they have to be able to inspect the bank records. And the bank, kind of weirdly, I would have probably guessed against this. In fact, I think I did once upon a time. The bank may be physically located outside of North Carolina, but they must be lawfully doing business in North Carolina because of online banking. Nowadays, you can do a deposit without physically visiting the bank, amazingly. And so they can be located outside of the state as long as they're FDIC insured, lawfully doing business in North Carolina.
Great. So good distinction there. Again, doesn't have to be located physically in North Carolina as long as they are lawfully doing business in the state.
Got it.
Sure, you're looking for those details in test questions like that.
Yeah, they'll beat you up on that stuff. And so let's see, all earnest money deposit, tenant security deposits, rents, or other trust funds. This is another one I would have guessed against. I would have thought I would have thought it'd be different.
Yeah.
But all those funds, other than HOA funds, can all be deposited into one. So if I am a broker in charge sole proprietor, if I'm collecting earnest money from a buyer, if I'm collecting tenant security deposits from tenants, if I'm collecting rents from tenants, I can deposit them all into one trust account. Maybe they don't have to be. You're allowed to have more than one, but you're allowed to have just one if that's your wish, if that's what you elect to do. As you can see from the second point, you can elect to have a sales trust account and a rental trust account, which I think is a good move. And the only time you must have multiple trust accounts is if you manage HOAs. Each HOA you manage must have a separate trust account for each HOA, homeowners association, in case you're not familiar with that term. Everybody's favorite. Anything you want to add to that before we do our challenge? Next challenge?
No, yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting to think, if I'm managing 300 properties, let's say 300 apartment units, I could technically have one trust account where all of those rents, all of those deposits, et cetera, are there. But if I am part of an HOA, and like, for example, in my neighborhood, there's 2 different HOAs. There's one that overall, for the overall community, and then there's another one for the section of townhomes in the community that has a separate HOA. So I'm understanding from what you just taught us that that's going to require 2 trust accounts, one for each of those HOAs, even though we're in the same neighborhood. Essentially, there's still 2 different governing bodies, if you will, as far as the HOA. So 2 different accounts.
Yes, sir. You got it.
Got it. All right.
Good stuff. Yeah, can't wait to get a trust account back. All right, let's see. True or false? A real estate firm at Oak Island, North Carolina, beautiful Oak Island, a lot of oak trees, may have one trust account to hold their earnest money deposits, security deposits, and rents collected. Let me give the audience a sec to think about it. We're going to say true. In this case, not every question is cruel and unusual. In this case,
yeah, I was going to say, I was looking for the catch, Rob. You didn't.
Yeah.
You didn't distract us on this one.
Sometimes the catch is actually no catch, right? Yeah. And so there you go. Sometimes you're like, wait a minute, seriously, that's
something though. There's something to be said for that. And let's sidebar here and talk to our audience, because that's what ends up happening sometimes with students is they're like, wait a minute, what's the catch here? And I don't know. One of the best things I've heard an instructor say, and it may have been you, Rob, but the instructor said, don't argue with the question. Is that you that always says that?
I say that, but I stole it from Kim Stotesbury. Don't.
Okay, yeah, Kim. I can see Kim saying that. Yeah, don't argue with the question and don't look for something that's not there. Don't look for something that's not there. So this is one of those that are like, okay, yeah, it seems obvious, it's true, but I'm going to sit here and overanalyze it to death.
Yeah. And it seems obvious to us, and it'll seem obvious to most of the students. But if you had asked me this question 10 years ago, I probably wouldn't have known. Even though I was already a broker, I would have thought, well, you probably need 2 trust accounts, don't you? But the answer is no. You can get by with just one. Logically, you would think you'd want one for sales and one for rentals, but they're perfectly within their legal right to have just one.
Yeah. All right. Lesson learned. All right. Let's talk about an upcoming number that's important, that being 3, the number 3. Why is this number important, at least in the discussion of trust money, number 3?
Yeah. There's a lot of things that will come up over the course of your pre-licensing class or have come up where the number 3 is pretty critical. But 3 also applies to trust account as far as when you must deposit the funds. And it's a little bit tricky with regards to when the clock starts. The good news is the consistency is that it's always 3 banking days, 3 banking days, 3 banking days, 3 banking days. And banking days are just Monday through Friday, excluding federal holidays. So, for example, Thanksgiving Day is not a banking day, but every other Monday through Friday, if it's not a federally recognized holiday, is a banking day. And so from there, it's 3 banking days with it actually splits again. We've got a split where it can be 3 banking days If it's rent or cash, all right, cash or rent must be deposited within 3 banking days of receiving the money. So if Jason pays me $5,000 earnest money deposit in cash today, or if he pays me $2,000 in rent, cash, check, or otherwise today, then I must deposit it within 3 banking days of receipt. All right. So if in doubt, you're usually leaning towards within 3 banking days of receipt. Now, let me give you the curve. The curve is, what if it is just earnest money deposit or tenant security deposit? The thing about this guy right here, EMD and tenant security deposit, those can come at the beginning before there's even a contract, right? So let's say Jason gives me a check for $5,000 for earnest money. And those of you who know the real estate market right now know that just because Jason's making an offer on a property doesn't mean Jason's going to have a contract. Right now, Jason just has an offer. All right. And he's made an offer and he's given me his $5,000 check. Well, technically, my 3 banking days, the clock does not start until we have acceptance or formation of the contract, right? And so that way, let's say, just for giggles, that we say Jason gives me that $5,000 check, we make an offer. 2 days go by, the seller comes back with a counter offer. And by that point, Jason's decided he doesn't want that house anyways. Like, I found something I don't even want to move to Wilmington anymore. He said, I'm going to stay in Carteret County. So what do? I just give him his check back. I say, okay, well, we reject the counter offer. Jason, here's your check back. So in the case of earnest money deposits and tenant security deposits, other than cash, it must be deposited no later than 3 banking days following acceptance of the offer. But if it was cash or if it is rent, it must be deposited within 3 banking days following receipt.
All right. So some important distinctions there. Are we talking about earnest money and or security deposits? If so, then we're going to hold on to it until something's been accepted, right? Whether it's the lease has been signed and accepted, or the offer that I made now has become accepted, and now we have a contract. So we have acceptance. Then it would be starting the clock down, right? The 3 days.
You got it. And the key too is that we're saying we're laying out the worst case scenario, not necessarily worst case, but the latest case scenario, because there's no rule that says you can't deposit it immediately if you want to.
Gotcha. Yeah.
But the clock starts. We turn the hourglass over the 3-day hour. It'd be pretty. I'm going to see if I can Amazon a 3-day sand through the hourglass, and be a really small little, not much sand would get through there for 3 days, or a really big hourglass. And so the 3 days starts once you have acceptance of the offer or lease. So that's why we make a big fuss about it. Now, I always say too, if it helps you remember it, cash, I call cash, I say it's deadly. Don't accept cash if you can help it. Send the people to the bank or even a gas station and get a money order, because I've dealt with cash a lot in my career as a property manager, and good things don't always happen when people pay in cash, my experience. So we perfectly within your right to say, sorry, man. I mean, your firm is within your firm's right to say, we're going to need you to go ahead and get a money order or write us a check for that, because we don't want $5,000 cash laying around our office, that type of thing. So, for whatever that's worth.
Yeah, no, I don't. Yeah, I agree. I've often considered cash as playing a game of hot potato. Like, you don't, let's hot potato. Let's get it out of, I don't want it. I don't want it.
I don't want it.
I do have it. If the potato is passed to me, I'm going to make sure to get that into the bank's hands ASAP, no matter what the scenario is. Now, for those who are perhaps tuning into this video, they didn't see the previous video. We pointed out what your little arrows that say PT mean. You want to reiterate what those mean?
Sure. Problem topic. The experts who write the real estate education in North Carolina, their research has shown that is something that tends to give people problems on the North Carolina real estate exam.
Gotcha. All right.
Yep. So, and so we've got acceptance and we have receipt. EMD and tenant security deposits other than cash must be deposited no later than 3 banking days following acceptance. Cash, earnest money, and tenant security deposits and rent must be deposited within 3 banking days following receipt.
Now, this three, again, number 3 banking days is important. And we're talking as though this applies to everybody. Does it apply to everybody? What do we got coming up next?
Let's see.
The specific.
Provisional broker. Ah, I see. Yeah. I was like, everybody. I mean, my granddad's not a broker. Well,
You were jiving with me on that point there.
Close, though. Close.
Close.
That was you gave me a good tip there. So provisional brokers, how about that? You know, it's what I call the training wheels, right? You got the training wheels on and you're not ready to go without training wheels yet. So a provisional broker must immediately turn trust money over to their broker in charge. Provisional broker cannot hold trust money, period, no exception. So that's an easy one for your test. Think training wheels on, somebody gives you a check for rent or earnest money deposit, immediately turn it over to your check.
We're not saying they can't receive it, right? You're saying just once you receive it, don't even think 3 days in your head. Don't think anything, but immediacy, get it out of your hands into the hands of the account.
That's right. Throw the quick out to the wide receiver broker in charge, get it out of your hands, get it in his hands, her hands, let them go score the touchdown.
Got it.
Perfect.
Now let's talk about a couple of more provisions.
Guidelines
for trust accounts.
They keep going. And so funny story about this. Trust accounts must have either trust account or escrow account written on all bank statements, checks, and deposit slips. That's for a couple reasons. Number one, having used to manage an operating account and a trust account, multiple versions of each, you want to make sure you're depositing the correct money into the correct account. So it helps. In fact, when I worked for my job in the Triangle, where I did a lot of property management, my bookkeeper, the great Laura, the bookkeeper, she would literally take a pink highlighter and circle trust account. Like, she's like, no, seriously, Rob, put it in the right account. And I was like, okay, thank you. Laura was just good like that. She was a C. She was probably related to Jason, probably somewhere in line.
That's right.
Yep. So she made sure that I did not overlook trust account on the slips, which was good. But an even crazier version of that is the real estate. I don't know if you've ever heard him say this, Jason. The Real Estate Commission says that back when they did accept checks for renewal fees, inevitably every single year, some firm or individual broker would pay the renewal fee from their trust account. It would literally say trust account on the check, which is obviously it's kind of like speeding by a police officer and waving at them as you pass, which Jason wouldn't do that because he goes the speed limit. But it'd be like me going 85 past a state trooper and saluting them as I go by. It's just not a smart move, right? You don't want to pay your $45 or your firm license renewal with your trust account check because, hey, that's not your money. That money belongs to somebody else. And so that's one of the reasons you need trust account on the check. You need trust account on the deposit slip. You need trust account on the bank statement. We want it to be, if Laura's still out there, and she probably is doing bookkeeping for somebody, she, as we speak, is using a pink highlighter and circling escrow account to make sure somebody like me doesn't accidentally deposit money in the wrong place.
We need Laura's, Rob.
The world needs Laura's. Right. She was great, is great. And so we never commingle, with the exception of that $100 exception. You may have up to no more than $100 of your personal money in your trust account. That's the deal. All right. Let's review. True or false? A buyer writes a $5,000 check to the Paracle Realty trust account as her earnest money deposit. The non-provisional broker receiving the check must deposit the check within 3 banking days of receiving it. Take a moment, pause. There's definitely some misdirection here. I'm going to have to think about it. I already know the answer, but I'm trying to pretend like I don't here. So what do we got? We've got a non-provisional broker, which is just a broker. It's a check for $5,000.
It's not
I
cash.
think, yeah, it's not cash. I'm going to say false. They must deposit the check within 3 banking days of offer acceptance. There you go. Had it been cash or had it been rent, it would have been 3 banking days of receipt. In this case, 3 banking days of acceptance.
And again, importance on that word non here, because if your brain just reads provisional broker, then this would totally make it false, but in a different or a different reason, right?
You choose false C instead of false B, right?
Right.
Reason, and watch out for that. You know, we got non and provisional on a different line. And so when you get to question 125, it can play tricks on you. Got to make sure. That's why practice tests are so good. You literally build your mental stamina up so that when you get to the PSI, you're not feeling quite so overwhelmed.
All right.
All right.
What else do we know about trust accounts?
Yeah, we're not out of the woods yet, but we're close. In the case of disputed trust funds, parties will not sign the official release. What should the broker do? Well, I know the answer, but I'm going to show you where. All right, because I like to pull this up, and it actually shows up in the offer to purchase. And so bear with me while I pull it up here. It's very important. I always stress to people that you can't really spend too much time looking at this contract because there's so much good information that is testable information. But right here is where they explain what we have to do with disputed trust funds, right? In the event of a dispute between seller and buyer, broker, whether it's Pericle Realty, the firm, or Chris Mann, attorney at law, regardless, cannot just release those funds based on what we think is the right thing to do. We have to retain those funds until either both parties sign a written release, or we're ordered to do so by a judge, or we turn them over to the appropriate clerk of court. So we cannot unilaterally decide to turn over trust funds when it comes to earnest money deposits. We either need a written disbursement by the parties, or we're going to want it to let basically till ordered to turn them over to the clerk of court. That's what I like to say.
Yeah.
All right, so that's good. I always like to, just like the real estate commission always points you to the rule number. When I can point you to the actual amendment in the contract, I'm like, there it is. Sit tight and let the judge sort it out. That's what I say. Hopefully, if you're lucky, you'll make it on Judge Judy, in which case let me and Jason know. We'll set the DVR so that we make sure we watch that. It'd be a good one. Absolutely. So in the case of disputed trust funds, by the way, just a footnote to that, because I've seen this as a test question. You know, we got to retain our records for 3 years. When does the 3 years begin? Well, the 3 years begins on the latest possible date. So if I'm involved in a lawsuit where the buyer's suing the seller over the earnest money deposit, whatever, give me my money back, or vice versa, then the 3 years begins on the date of disbursement, right? And so brokers must retain records of the transaction for 3 years from the date of disbursement, which makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it certainly does. Another number 3 there that's important too.
Exactly. 3 years. Exactly. 3 shows up a lot. All right. Can a big firm have an interest-bearing trust account? And that's also something you can see on the offer to purchase. And the answer is yes, as long as it is disclosed to the person's paying it. Right there on the offer to purchase, it'll say that, yes, we in fact do, or we have the right to draw interest on that trust account, and who it's going to belong to. It'll usually belong to the firm, earnest money deposits, security deposits, rent, etc. Look, if you're going to have a trust account, you might as well make some money on the side as a result, and it's perfectly legal as long as you notify the clients that, yes. It's funny, I've had people before ask me, they're like, well, I get the interest, don't I? And I'm like, this is the client saying that. And I'm like, nah. It's our trust account. Yeah. So you start your own bank account, draw your own interest. This is our bank account. We keep the interest. But you'd be amazed. Some people say, well, I'm not going to agree to that. I'm like, okay, call Chris Mann. All right. can a big firm have a trust account with a credit union? Well, we know no. Funds must be held in a bank or savings and loan institution, federally insured, lawfully doing business in North Carolina, but they can be physically located out of state.
All right. That's a lot on trust accounts, right?
It
And
is.
so in a nutshell, how do we sum up trust accounts? How would you sum that up in terms of most important high level points?
Sure. High level points. It's a safe harbor bank account, money
Okay.
that does not belong to you. You're warehousing that money for other people, or someone's warehousing it, right? And it must be deposited within 3 banking days of either receipt or contract formation, depending on the circumstances. And I would highlight it by saying if you can do business without a trust account, I think your life will be a little simpler. But in some cases, you have to have a trust
That's an
account.
option, right?
Yeah, property management for others. So it's an important part of what we do. I'd also add that the North Carolina Real Estate Commission teaches a really, really good trust account class. I'm saying that secondhand because I've never taken it, but they highly recommend it. People who have taken it have told me it's the best class that they teach. And so if you're going to be a bookkeeper for a firm, or if you're going to be a broker in charge with your own trust account, I think now you're actually required to take it.
Yeah, it is required. Yeah.
Yeah, it didn't used to be. It used to be my day, it was optional. Back in
Yeah.
my day, we didn't have seat belts, right? We had big Zach Morris cell phones and pay phones. But yeah, nowadays you got to take it, which is smart. It should be that way.
Yeah.
Anytime you're messing with other people's, I tell you, there's not many things that can get your license revoked quicker than using other people's money to pay off your own debt or whatever. It's just obviously it's wrong.
Mismanaging it, right? Just
Yeah.
Not having it in the right place and accounted.
And being unorganized can cost you big time.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. Well, let's move on now into another status, a broker status. Again, just to recap, we've talked about the provisional broker status. We've talked about the full broker or broker status, also called in test questions, non-provisional broker. Again, key concept there. We've talked about the broker in charge status. Now we've got another one, limited non-resident commercial broker. Tell us about that. And I see that this is also one that includes a problem topic.
Yep. And so it occurred to me not long ago how perfect this name is. The title is perfect.
Because it describes what it is, right?
It does. And it doesn't always. Sometimes you'll have like the Machinery Act or like the Enabling Act. And I'm like, what was the Tax Act already taken? Like, I don't get it. But this is a perfect description. It is a limited license, meaning you can't do residential. You can only do commercial. It is a non-resident, or it's available to only non-residents, because you are not allowed to live in North Carolina. You must reside out of state. And to double down on commercial, you can only do commercial real estate transactions. All right. So limited non-resident commercial broker license. Right. And so it's as advertised, limited. A great test question to get right would say, can a limited non-resident commercial broker be involved, broker a $10 million residential mansion home purchase? No, because it has to be for commercial property, which is pretty much anything non-residential. Anything non-residential would qualify as commercial. This could be for industrial space, office space, restaurant space, anything along those lines. So commercial space. Now, who qualifies? Well, as I said, you have to live outside of North Carolina. You're going to need, and this is an important little footnote here, it's just because you're like, well, I have a house in New Jersey. Do I qualify? Not yet, right? Living in New Jersey is a great start, but you must also have an active broker license, and actually, as it turns out, or salesperson license. Either one's fine. Must have a salesperson or broker license in that qualifying state. Now, I can't tell you which states don't qualify, but the last time I looked at a map that the Real Estate Commission had at a conference I was at, it's most of them. It's most qualifying, most states, as long as you have a broker license or a salesperson license in that state, then you will most likely qualify for at least that far. That's not all you have to do, but that's a good start. Now, the second point here is very critical. You must sign 2 forms, right? You must affiliate with a local North Carolina broker. So Jason or I, either one would qualify, but they don't have to be a broker in charge. Any non-provisional broker can serve as your affiliation. You don't have to affiliate with a firm. You don't have to affiliate, or they don't have to affiliate with a broker in charge. They have to affiliate with a non-provisional broker.
It's kind of like having a sponsor.
That's what I always
fair?
think of it as.
Yeah.
It's like a sponsorship.
Sponsoring you during this transaction. Yeah.
I got a sponsor. And then the other one, speaking of sponsoring, talking money, the second one is the brokerage cooperation agreement, which in commercial brokerage is everything. A lot of commercial properties aren't listed in the MLS. So the way you find out how much you'd make as a buyer agent is you call the listing firm and you say, hey, can you send me a cooperation agreement? I have a buyer interested in buying your little shopping center in Durham, North Carolina. Can you please send me over a cooperation agreement? And that basically details who the firms are, who's involved, and who's going to get paid what. That is the cooperation agreement. So both of those have to be filled out. All right. They need, the out-of-state commercial broker needs a sponsor declaration of affiliation and needs a brokerage cooperation agreement with a North Carolina broker. And then once that's done, you can conduct only commercial real estate brokerage activity in North Carolina. Only commercial real estate brokerage activity. No $10 million mansions. But if you want to buy a $10 million shopping center, by all means, go for it.
Yep.
And I'm available if you need a look, because I've seen how big some of these commercial paydays are. If you're in the market for a supervisor, or let me say it more nicely than that, a sponsorship, I'm available. Jason's probably available too. We'll take the $80,000 payday to babysit someone who's purchasing or selling North Hills Mall, something like that.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, let's true or false time. Challenge time. A broker who is actively licensed in Minnesota, the Great Lakes state, may receive a limited North Carolina broker's license. I think it's the state of Mini Lakes. I messed that up. Minnesota may receive a limited North Carolina broker's license to participate in the purchase of an investment beach home in the Outer Banks. A little twisty there.
Let me think. A lot in that question. Yeah.
A lot. So first of all, where are they from? They're from Minnesota.
Okay.
They could probably get a limited North Carolina commercial broker's license. I like the term investment, but it doesn't matter what you're planning to use it for. It matters is what type of property it is. And so a beach home is still a home. It's still residential. I'm going to say false, right? Say false. The limited North Carolina commercial real estate license does not apply to residential purchases. Even though you're planning to rent it 50 weeks a year or whatever, it's still considered a residential home. You could use this license to buy a shopping center in wherever we were, the Outer Banks, but not a beach home.
So this is probably a good time to say then, you keep saying commercial. So what if I am in Minnesota and I do want to do this? Can I not practice in North Carolina at all? I have a license in Minnesota.
Sure. So there's a couple things you could do. If you're from Minnesota, you could, of course, you're ready to move somewhere warmer. You could get a regular North Carolina broker license and start out when you apply for it and start out as a provisional broker. As a Minnesota broker, you could also refer your residential buyer to Jason or myself. And as long as your Minnesota broker does not enter the state, then Jason or I could pay you a referral fee as that out-of-state broker, as long as you are active in your home state and as long as you do not participate in the transaction in North Carolina. So it used to really confuse me, because limited North Carolina commercial broker's license, that says you may come to North Carolina and participate. And then I also would read where they say, well, you can pay an out-of-state broker as long as they don't move, as long as they don't participate. And what they're talking about is if that Minnesota broker just refers their client to me or Jason or whomever, then we could pay that Minnesota person a referral fee as long as they're actively licensed in that state. So there's two different ways they could get paid for a real estate transaction. Being a Minnesota broker, they could either get this limited commercial license, come here and be involved in a commercial transaction, or they could just stay home, right? It's probably nice up there in the summer, stay there, refer the business to us. We can close the deal for them and then send them a check.
Right.
Probably to their broker in charge, I suspect, not to the individual. I'd have to check the Minnesota laws on that.
Right. Yeah, but we started out this particular segment, today's video, again, reminding folks that North Carolina is a one license state, meaning broker license, as opposed to a salesperson status or a broker associate or what have you in other states. But again, that is only allowed, you are only allowed to practice real estate in North Carolina with that license. Another misconception, what you say, Rob, is that I get my real estate license, I can practice anywhere, right? It's a real estate license.
Correct. Now, a lot of states will have reciprocity, but it's a process. You can't just show up with your pocket card and say, no, I'm good, I got this.
Right.
You could potentially take your North Carolina broker's license, apply for your Minnesota broker's license. They're going to probably want you to maybe take a test. If not a test, certainly take their equivalent of post-licensing. But yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all broker's license. It's good for the state where it was issued.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. All right. Let's move into next. That is licensing of business entities.
Yep. I love this section. Yeah. I love this section. It shows up, and it's always fascinating to people in post-licensing 303, because what's the difference between a sole proprietor and a firm? How do you start a firm, right? I'm always like, when you're in pre-licensing, it's a bit forward to be thinking about a firm license, but it doesn't hurt to at least have a relatively brief understanding of it. So if you have an entity, a business entity, either a corporation, a partnership, or probably what's most common is an LLC, and you want to be paid as that entity, right? So right now I have an LLC, but I don't get paid to the LLC. Everyone pays me as just Rob Grantmeyer, sole proprietor. That's how I get paid. If I wanted to be paid to my LLC, I would then need to take one more step, which is get my firm license with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. So you don't, to be paid as a affiliated person of a firm, as to be paid as Jason Morris, broker in charge eligible with Paracle Realty, they're paying Jason Morris. To pay, if anyone pays me, they're paying Rob Grantmeyer, broker in charge, sole proprietor. But if Jason has an LLC, or if I want to be paid to my LLC, I must go to step 2. I did step 1 already. Step 1 was actually the hard part. I went through the North Carolina Secretary of State website, set up my own LLC. I think it cost about $120-ish. And then step 2, once you have the entity, is when you must apply, or if you want to be paid as that entity, that's when you go on the North Carolina Real Estate Commission website and apply for a firm license, right? But none of this is necessary if you're happy with being paid as Bob Smith or Susie Andrews or Jason Morris or Rob Grantmeyer, whatever. You can go your whole career, just like you can go your whole career and never be a BIC. You can go your whole career and never start your own entity, never start your own firm license. We go into more detail into the advantages and disadvantages of being paid as an entity and post-licensing. Of course, we don't give tax advice, but we talk a little bit about the laws and whatnot. And so that's the significance of a business entity if you wish to be paid as your LLC. And I'm amazed, even to this day, I hear people in post-licensing that are like, my company pays me as my LLC. And I'm like, that's probably not accurate because you're a provisional broker. And they go, let me go get my paycheck. And they get it. And they're like, yep, you're right. They don't pay me to my LLC. I told you. They can't, because they can't pay your LLC until you have a firm license, and you can't have a firm license as a provisional broker. So it happens. Now,
Yeah.
you do not need to be a BIC in order to have a firm license, unless you plan to advertise or hire people, but you must be at least non-provisional. You could go ahead and start working on your LLC while you're provisional. And trust me, you need a running start for it, because I almost had to, take a vacation after I did it. It was not easy. But you must be non-provisional to obtain your firm license from the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Anything you
All
want to
right,
add to
so
that?
I think I got that. Good distinction there. Good reminder that if two steps, it's two steps, right? If you want to be paid through your LLC, well, the creation or formation of your LLC, step number one, and that's handled through Secretary of State. Really has nothing necessarily to do with the Real Estate Commission or anything real estate. You're setting up an LLC.
Correct.
Step two, though, right? Step two, remember how we said, especially with that new rule change, that you must be paid through the firm now. And in this case, if you want to be paid through paid to your LLC, you need to run that through a firm license, right? And so having that firm license set up through the Real Estate Commission is definitely that important step two. So a lot of folks don't remember those two steps, right? They've only done the one step, and they're like, okay, now pay me through my LLC. No, you have to get a firm license. And then some folks will say, oh, well, geez, to get a firm license, I have to be my own BIC. Don't I have to go and take the BIC course and all of that? And you're reminding us here, no, not necessarily. If you simply want to be paid through LLC, like a pass-through type of business, then you don't have to be a BIC, because you're not going to be advertising your LLC. You're not going to be hiring people under your LLC. So therefore, you don't have to become a BIC to get your firm license. So you don't have to become a BIC, but coming up next, we're going to introduce a term called qualifying broker, right? So don't have to be a BIC, but what do you have to have?
Well, you do have to be a full broker, and you would have to serve as the qualifying broker. Firm must have a qualifying broker who is at minimum a non-provisional broker, and the QB firm license in North Carolina, somebody is going to serve as the qualifying broker, and that qualifying broker must have an ownership stake in the business, in the partnership. They must be a general partner of a partnership, manager of an LLC, or an officer of a corporation. Funny enough, medical practices work the same way. You can't just start a medical practice as just some person that wants to own a dental office. You have to, somebody in the ownership group needs to be licensed to practice medicine. Similar to real estate, somebody in the ownership structure must be licensed as a full broker, non-provisional broker, to be able to conduct real estate activity. So usually at the top of a firm like Paracle Realty or Coldwell Banker or whoever, the owner also serves as the qualifying broker. And sometimes the qualifying broker is an owner who's behind the scenes, and then they hire multiple BICs to run the offices, or it could be someone who starts their own LLC just to be paid for to that entity, in which case you would be the qualifying broker of your own little LLC, of your own little firm there. So that happens pretty regularly once people establish themselves as a non-provisional broker. If they choose to be paid as an entity, they will in fact become a qualifying broker of that entity in that firm.
No class to take. We're not talking about a BIC, right? It's different.
Nope. Yep, it's totally different. It's a weird paradigm, because a lot of people think, well, the QB, in some instances, you say the qualifying broker is the boss's boss. Right. They're the person who's above the BIC. But education wise, they may not even be a BIC, right? They just, and I see this come up sometimes with friends of mine who own their own real estate company, and they're married and they own 100% of the company right now. But their spouse may decide to go ahead and get a broker's license and get on non-provisional status. And that way, if something were to happen to the now current owner, the surviving spouse could step in as the qualifying broker, and they would not have to grant, any ownership interest to anyone else, right? And so I always say it's a good move if somebody owns their own real estate firm. Not a bad idea for their spouse to go ahead, get licensed, even though they may not be practicing. As long as they're licensed and non-provisional, in a pinch, they could step up and become the qualifying broker of that company.
Got it.
Yep, good stuff. All right, cool. So let's say true or false time. A North Carolina non-provisional broker, dadgummit, non-provisional, wishes to start their own LLC. It's dangerous, isn't it? Start their own LLC for compensation and liability purposes. Once they have successfully registered their LLC with the Secretary of State, they may apply for their firm license with the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. Pause in a sec. I think yes. And by the way, one of the reasons, circle back for a sec, the reason why we emphasize step 1 and step 2, there was something that we used to say when I worked briefly at Verizon back in the day. They said every time that phone rings, it cost us $8. And so the more you can get it right the first time and the customer doesn't have to call back, the better. Well, the real estate commission, like any business entity, would rather not create unnecessary phone calls. So they don't want people like me and Jason calling up and saying, how do I get a firm license? They would rather you already know, because the first question is, do you have an LLC already? You don't. Okay, well, that's where you start. So step 1 is Secretary of State. Step 2 is the firm license. So in this case, true non-provisional brokers can serve as the qualifying broker of an entity as long as they do not plan to hire other brokers. If you decide you want to hire other brokers, then you would need to be a QB as well as a broker in charge.
All right. Good. I love this explanation, Rob. That's fantastic.
Oh, well, thank you.
So we got some dates coming up next, kind of shifting gears just a little bit to throw in some important dates. We've thrown in an important number of 3, and we know that in what we've talked about in terms of the number 3, that is 3 banking days, remembering that rule, but also distinguishing between receipt and acceptance where applicable. Then we also talked about 3 years. Now we got, again, some important dates. And you're saying that these dates are in June, therefore June is a big deal, right?
June's a big deal. It's a big deal. I love the month of June, right? I got married in June. Every time I teach
it in June.
Is it really? I was gonna say, every time I teach this, it's somebody's like, that's my birthday. And so it's a great month, man. June's one of my favorite months. For a non-football month, it's really good. Which date is your birthday?
June the 6th.
Okay.
So you're right here in this very first important week.
Lucky for you, there's not much going on in real estate education.
Quite the opposite. Yeah, quite the opposite. So ever since I've taken on this role, the first week of June, which I used to take off every year of my professional life until I started working with the school. And as you'll see here, a lot happening in the first week of June because we're going up against a very important deadline for all licensees. What is that deadline?
So we got 2 that are critical. And if we go just chronological, the first one that kicks off is June 10th. Yeah. That's what we call the CE deadline. CE stands for continuing education. And so almost every broker has to do 8 hours of CE to stay active. And if you fail to do your 8 hours, your license will eventually be inactive, right? And so the reason I say almost all brokers is as a provisional broker, as someone who just received your license this year, your CE requirement starts on the 2nd year of renewal. So like if you're licensed, if you get your license right now, February 28th, your first round of CE will be due June 10th, 2023. But for Jason and myself, we'll have to do our CE by June 10th, 2022 in order to stay active. And it's embarrassing if you miss it. You don't want to miss it. I know some people who literally like to wait till the last minute, but I don't even think I've taken it in June before. I think I've always had it done by the end of probably the middle of May, because I just can't stand the idea of running out of time like that.
Yeah. I wish more people were like you. And so
like your life easier, wouldn't it?
Yeah. I no longer enjoy my birthday week now because there's so many people who aren't like you. Instead, they are rushing during that last week or first week in June, last week of the CE year, to meet this deadline, to get in before the deadline, those 8 hours, which breaks down to 2 different classes essentially. Now, I want to make a distinction here, Rob, because, excuse me, so oftentimes we get a lot of students who get confused about or mix up CE, as you just described, and what we talked about earlier, post-licensing. It's not the same thing, right?
It's not. So post-licensing, in theory, you only do it once. If you do it right, you only do it once. You take 90 hours within the first 18 months of licensure. It's post-licensing 301, 302, 303. It's basically extra class for new licensees. This CE is like lifetime achievement almost, like, and it's always interesting to me when I talk to, like, attorneys have to do it, doctors have to do it, everybody who has a profession, nurses do it, I'm sure teachers do. If you have any kind of occupational licensing certification, you're going to most likely be required to do continuing education. It's their way of making sure that you're fresh on all the new rules and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So again, if you encounter a test question, which you will, on post-licensing education requirements, don't get that confused with CE education requirements. You'll be tested on both. And again, for those of you who are on your way to earning your license, you will have most likely until that second June 10th, basically, to start your clocks for CE requirements. But for after that, after you renew your license for the first time, which is going to be that next deadline Rob's going to talk to you about, you'll need to always remember June 10th is your deadline for completing those 8 hours of CE. It's confusing too, because it's not a calendar year, is it, Rob? I mean, CE runs off of a July 1st through June 10th calendar. And so that's sometimes confusing for some.
Most people have no idea, and I used to be one of them, that you can take CE as early as July 1st. They're like, thought you couldn't take it till April or May. No, people run CE year round. In fact, there are CE cruises, there are CE, of special events. You could take a cruise out of like Carolina Beach, or I think some people even like go. I mean, as long as it's a North Carolina instructor, you could be on a cruise to Alaska doing, as long as you're spending at least 8 hours of that in a, conference room doing CE with a certified real estate instructor, North Carolina instructor, you can count it. So it's all good.
Yeah. So, and I like how you're distinguishing here, active, inactive. Active, you're going to stay active as long as you meet that deadline. You've completed those 8 hours by June 10th of every year. But if you don't, you go into an inactive status. More on active and inactive coming up. But what's the other deadline in June?
The other big deadline, I call this New Year's Eve, because the real estate commission, their fiscal year ends on June 30th, and that's how most municipalities, I believe, work too. Cities, counties, they also end on the 30th of June and start on July 1st. And someone once told me their bail bondsman license, I guess there's a bail bondsman commission in North Carolina, and I think theirs begins on October 1st, I want to say, but I don't know, don't quote me on it. But ours ends on June 30th, and that is the last day that you can pay. You think Jason's stressed on June 6th. The real estate commission is loving June 30th. I don't think they do this anymore, but back in the day, they said they used to have to pull an all-nighter to get all the renewals processed. I was like, that doesn't sound like my kind of all-nighter, right? I'm thinking
especially for the only instructor on the Go School team who knows bail bondsman.
That's right. Exactly. You never know when you might need a good bail bondsman. And so June 30th, renewal deadline, pay $45 to stay. Now here's important, because over here we have active. The $45 keeps you current. And as a wise student once said, I can't take credit for it, you pay your currency to stay current, right? So current, or the opposite would be expired, right? That is 100% determined by whether or not you pay the money, pay the 40, and it's cheap. $45, And a common question is, can I just get on auto pay? Can I just give them 500 and then they reach out when they need more? Nope. The store officially opens on May 15th. You can pay, unlike CE, which you could take on July 1st, anytime between July 1st and June 10th. You can pay the $45 renewal as early as May 15th. And if you don't pay it by June 30th, then you're officially expired. And it's going to basically cost you double to renew at that point.
Yeah, so easy points here, everyone, on your exam. Understanding again the differences between a status of active, inactive, or current and expired, which triggers which status. A lot of times people get these confused, but again, this is an easy point. June 30th, remember, that's when you have to pay the money, your currency, to stay current. Because we renew our license every year. And by renewing our license, I mean we pay the renewal fee. And again, the deadline to do that is June 30th. People get that mixed up with June 10th. Don't do that. June 10th, again, has to do with educational requirements, specifically CE, not post-licensing. If you see a question that says post-licensing is due every June 10th, there's something wrong, right? That's not the right thing. June 10th has to do with your CE deadline. So June 10th, June 30th, you're right, Rob. June is indeed a big deal, not only because it's your wedding anniversary and my birthday, but there's these other things too.
It's pretty big, right? And everybody occasionally at some point, don't beat yourself up if it happens to you, you'll fall for one of these distractor questions because it sounds so good. If someone says broker Rob must do his CE by June 10th in order to keep his license current, you go, yeah, that sounds good, but it'd be wrong because I must do my CE by June 10th to keep my license active. And I must pay my $45 by June 30th to stay current, but they're easy to mix up.
Yes. And let's note too, that if you fall in the red on either of these, whether it's the red inactive or the red expired, naturally that means all brokerage activities must cease right away. You can no longer continue and or pick up new business when you're in these statuses. So we'll talk more about that too, but keep that in mind. No, can't work.
The penalty box for you Hurricanes fans, right? You're in the penalty box and you're going to be in there till it probably at least July 1st, probably a few days is how long it's going to take. Assuming you do everything possible to correct your error, it's still going to be a few days. And meanwhile, that means don't go to closings, don't show property, don't call your prospects. Someone else, like I said, your broker in charge may need to appoint someone else to carry the ball, just to use every sports metaphor I can think of, to carry the ball temporarily until you're back ready to practice what we call legal brokerage. You don't want to get caught practicing illegal brokerage.
Right. Let's dive a little further into this active status. And again,
we'll just kind of wrap with a few different explanations on it. Active, look, you need an active license to engage in brokerage activities. You must, and here's a very common question, and I don't blame people. People think, well, look, I just want to do referrals. I work for Red Hat or NC State or Duke or whatever. I know tons of people who are wanting to buy and sell real estate. Why don't I just take the class, pass the exam, and then shut it down and just do referrals? Well, you sort of can, but you'll need to keep your license active and current if that's your plan. So in order to be paid any compensation, including referral fees, you must do your post-licensing, you must do your CE each year, starting on year 2, and you must, of course, pay your $45. It's really a pretty easy thing. Your total investment in keeping your license, once you get past the post-licensings, less than $200 a year when you factor in the cost of CE and the renewal fee. So it's small. I mean, you could pretty much one referral could pay for 10 years worth of continuing education and renewal fees. So definitely want to make sure people understand you cannot do referrals or any kind of transaction-based compensation unless you are active.
Key status, active. Yes.
Active. Must be active. Now, some people, and I even did this for a few years when I worked for a real estate magazine, I elected to go inactive because I did not need my broker's license. This was at right before the recession. There was a boom, a bubble, if you will, and people were buying the heck out of luxury real estate. And so the magazine I used to work for advertised the heck out of luxury real estate. And we were so busy, we worked about 70 hours a week, that I didn't have time to do brokerage. So I just put I call it put my license in the glass case for a couple years and went inactive. And that's fine. You can do that. You can choose to put your license on inactive. And what you do is you just pay your renewal fee each year and do not do your CE. Don't do your CE, but pay your renewal fee. That results in an inactive license. But like I said, your license is in a glass case. You cannot use it until you reactivate it. But it's a nice thing if you're going to, let's say, work 10 more years at NC State or IBM or whatever, and then activate your license, then so be it. Just pay your $45 renewal fee. Don't do your CE. To me personally, I think it's more worthwhile to just go ahead and do the CE, pay the $45, because it's harder than it used to be to come back from an inactive license. It used to be you only had to do 16 hours of CE. Now you got to do 2 post classes and CE. So I would honestly, I advise students, get active and stay active. It's a very small time and monetary commitment based on what you can get out of it.
Yeah. Or you could be on inactive status, like you said, voluntarily, and still take your continuing education, right? I mean, I could still,
That's a great point.
I'm just not practicing it. And that's indeed what I would recommend too these days, because like you referred to, it's a much harder to reactivate your license when you're ready, take it out of the glass case when you're ready, if you haven't stayed up to date on your required CE. So, but yeah, if you simply failed to do that, not voluntarily, but you just simply failed to do that, you would go on an inactive status. But if you wanted to voluntarily go on inactive to do what you're saying, I would still recommend staying up to date on your CE. But
great call. Yeah, especially because I know there's a school in the Triangle called the Go School that does a great job with CE. And they're wonderful people to take it with. Or you could squeeze in a CE cruise. You never know. So,
don't get me wrong. That was not a shameless plug.
I hear you. Yeah, but you're right. Because honestly, it's not like the old days back when the world was black and white televisions, and I was first starting out. You had, like I said, 16 hours. I knocked that out in 2 days. Now to come back from an inactive license without CE for more than 2 years, and this will show up in a sec, is you got to take 2 post-licensing classes. That's 60 hours of education, plus that year's CE. So it makes sense, like Jason said, just keep doing the CE, stay up to date, and do your thing there. While you're inactive, you cannot market of any kind, right? So that includes handing out business cards. So even referrals seem innocent enough. All you're doing is basically making a phone call and connecting a buyer or a seller with another active broker, but you must be active to receive a fee for that. You can certainly make the phone call as an inactive licensee, but you're not going to be paid a fee for it unless you are active and current with your license status.
Yeah, and this takes it back to the very first topic that we started out with in video number 1 of our series, Who Needs a License, and the definition of who needs a license. It keeps coming back to if you participate in real estate transactions for the compensation.
Money, yeah.
Right? And so if you want to be paid, you have to be on an active license status. Yeah.
Yep. And it's easy enough to do. Like we always say, it's front loaded. If you can get past the PSI exam, it's mainly downhill from there. The CE is not that challenging. It's pretty interesting usually. Yeah. So speaking of, this just kind of puts a little frame around what we just said. This didn't happen to me, but it's happened to some people I've known since then. If you remain inactive for more than 2 years with no education while you're inactive, you would be required to complete the current year CE and 60 hours of post-licensing education and submit that form 2.08 to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. So it's not like the old days when you got to take, 2 days of class, now you're going to have to take 60 hours of class and this year's CE requirement. So makes sense. Just stay up to date on your education each year. It's relatively minor.
Yeah.
All right. Now expired means that it is no license. No, you didn't pay your renewal fee. And this is even worse. Brace yourselves. I've had a couple students who had to come back because their license expired for more than 2 years. Expired means no license. You quite simply failed to pay your renewal fee on or before June 30th. All licenses, firms, broker, even timeshare registrations expire at midnight on June 30th. If your license, brace yourself, if you hope you're sitting down, if your license remains expired for more than 2 years, you will be required to retake the 75-hour class and pass the license exam to reinstate your license. So that stinks, right? It's one thing to have to do 60 hours of CE and take an update class, but we're saying if you're expired, meaning no $45 for more than 2 years, you will have to start over. Now, when I say have to start over, they're not going to come arrest you and take you to real estate class, but if you decide if you've been out for more than 2 years and you want to get back into it, that's when you have to start over. And I had a student not that long ago, back in late 2021, this happened to her. I'll never forget, she sent me a picture of herself walking out of the PSI testing center. She was so relieved. She had to start over, but she did it. She got all her stuff back. And one of my first ever students, a guy named Jeff Fowler, who was with early Go School student, same situation with him. Both of those students let their license expire around the recession in 2008 and just let it go and had to start over, which is a bummer.
Yeah, I know licensed agents out there who have it written in their wills or power of attorney paperwork and what have you, that should I become incapacitated, no matter what happens, please continue to renew my license because I may come out of it. And there's benefit to that, because that's all it takes is simply to make sure you pay that renewal fee every year before the deadline, again, June 30th. And so if you even can write into some kind of paperwork and let your family and friends know that, hey, come June 30th, everyone needs to ask me, did you renew your license? And if I can't respond, renew it for me, or whatever the case. But I thought it was great how some folks have taken that precaution, because they don't want to let it expire, because as you see here, 2 years go by before you know it, and then you're in an expired status. And then real estate market gets hot, and they want to jump back in and do another round in real estate career, and boy, they have to start all over again. And that's so easy to prevent that. It's so easy. So
yeah, and $45. I mean, I'm so grateful the real estate commission only charges. They could charge a lot more than that. Don't tell them I said that, but they could, and we'd still pay it.
I was going to note too that if someone's watching this and maybe in 2023 or 2024, who knows what it might be then. We can't say that the real estate commission's never gone up on that, but for right now, yeah, $45, June 30th. That's all you got to do.
And they've been relative, because when I first started 22 years ago, it was 40. And they only went up $5 in the last 22 years. I think that's very, very reasonable. And by contrast, I had a student one time with a welding inspector license. His was $1,600 that he paid every 3 years. But I was like, still, you break that down, that's a lot of money each year, right? And so $45 is, that's lunch out for two people nowadays. So we're very, 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 very grateful that that's all it is, and easy enough to do. I always try to pay mine on the 15th of May, that day if I can, and then I'll usually double back and check it one more time in June, just to make sure that I did in fact pay it, because it's definitely not something I ever want to flirt with going expired.
Right.
All right, so to recap, all real estate licenses expire at midnight on June 30th. That includes firm licenses. That includes all broker license, broker, that means provisional, broker in charge. Payment must be received no later than June 30th. Nowadays, they're not really feeling the check option anymore. I don't blame them. Too many people paid from their trust account. You used to be able to go and pay in person, but I don't even think they're doing that now. Just go online, ncrec.gov. It's real simple, real easy to use. They're great. Piece of cake. All right. Now, paying renewal fee keeps you current. Annual renewal fee also required to maintain inactive license. Licensees who fail to pay the renewal fee will have their license placed on expired. So we've kicked that around. I think we're pretty comfortable with that. So true or false? A North Carolina broker has not paid their $45 renewal fee for the past 2 years. To reinstate their license, they will need to complete the current year CE requirement and 60 hours of post-licensing. I wish this for them. That sounds bad, but I'm afraid it's actually worse, right? Because had they not done their CE, that would be true. But in this case, failing to pay your renewal fee kicks you out. You're voted off the island at that point. Failure to pay the renewal fee by June, I should say by BY. You could see my money's on currency there. I'm like, buy, but it's cheaper than most things you'll buy on Amazon. Fees by June 30th results in an expired license, expired for 2+ years, equals no more broker license, which is not good. So please try to avoid that.
All right. And then finally, we've got a prohibited act that's important to discuss right here.
Sure. So don't lie on your application, right? You don't want to do that. License may be suspended or revoked if obtained by false or fraudulent representation. So be honest. They're going to ask you some questions on your app. They're going to obviously check your criminal background, but they're going to also ask you about any criminal background charges or criminal convictions. And they're going to probably ask you about some financial situations, any unsatisfied judgments, that type of thing. So just be honest, and they're pretty flexible. As I mentioned, I've got a inglorious history of knowing a lot of bail bondsmen. I'm just kidding about that. Did know one, and so hey, they let me in the club, and so I think as long as you're honest and you haven't done anything that is too egregious, then I think you're going to be just fine.
Yeah, do what you're supposed to do. All right. Well, we've covered a lot today, and we are actually going to end on our next segment, which was an introduction to the Real Estate Commission. But I say, let's pause once again. Let's give our audience a break. Let's give ourselves a break. We'll pick up the next video series, starting with an introduction to NCREC. That is, again, the Real Estate Commission. We've already mentioned their name a few times, but let's make sure that you understand them more thoroughly, as again, you will be tested on the structure of NCREC and what it is they are responsible for, what it is they can and can't do. And then we'll also go into on video number 3, a very important topic regarding disclosure of agency options here in North Carolina. Hugely tested subject. We're going to spend a lot of time on that. So again, video number 3, we will start diving into agency disclosure, specifically known as the WWREA, that is the Working with Real Estate Agents in North Carolina. So again, let's, for now, pause, take a break, and then we'll see you guys back here for video number 3 in our series. Rob, any final words for this video?
No, that sounds great. Yeah, I think the Real Estate Commission breakdown and all that is such an important topic. Good idea. We'll save that for next time.
Yeah. All right, buddy. We'll see you guys next time. Thanks again for your time today, Rob. We'll see you soon. All right.
See you guys soon.